Good afternoon. I'd like to first thank everybody for being here. Pretty important weekend for our football team. Another chance to add guys to our roster. I'd like to start by thanking Ryan Cowden and John Salge. Ryan as our personnel director and Salge as our college scouting director. Both of those guys have overseen the accumulation of information on these prospects for the last year. All of our scouts, both pro and college, have been heavily involved in the process. Coach Vrabel and his staff jumped both feet in and started to evaluate and scout the players once they kind of got settled. And then all of our support staff, our medical team, our football ops team, our media relations team, everybody that has had interaction with these prospects, we lean heavily on those guys for information and building the entire profile of the player. So looking forward to it. Should be an exciting weekend for us, and with that, we'll open it up for questions.
John, with the change in coaching staff and maybe some preferences these guys have, did your board change much in the last couple of weeks or months then?
We that's one of the first things that we did was to sit down with Coach Vrabel, coordinators and position coaches, and we kind of merged, I would say, our position specifics and critical factors, if you will, on the different players. And again, this is a shared vision that we want for this football team. One that I think that we're aligned from a vision standpoint and the types of players we want to add. I would say we really shuffled the board around a lot, but there were some pieces that moved, a little here or a little there.
John, how would you say the strengths of the draft match up with current needs of the team right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done a good job the last couple of years, and hopefully we can do it again this week, of finding value in all areas of the draft. That's one of the things we've been really focusing on the last couple of weeks is some of the later round guys, at least that we think might be later round guys, to post draft guys, making sure we do a good job combing over everything there. But I think there's value at every position, really in all parts of the draft that we can come away a more competitive football team at the end of the weekend than when we started.
How much is some of your later maneuvering in free agency an effort to sort of maximize your ability to pick best talent available as opposed to trying to address holes?
Yeah, I think what we wanted to try to do was be able to go into the draft with what we thought was a pretty deep roster. I think we've got good depth on our roster now. We've got good competition. Really at all the position groups, and hopefully we can add some guys here over the next 3 or 4 days to maybe even make that more competitive. So I would say that definitely played a part in it.
Mike, first time through this as a head coach, what's this process been like for you?
It's been great. I mean, we've been on the road. Sometimes we're together. Sometimes we have kind of divided and tried to conquer. But we've been on the road. We've been able to meet with guys that have come in here, with the 30 visit guys, and sit down and talk. I think that's been well planned out with the schedule. I mean, we've had 4 or 5 guys in here in a day, and been able to sit down with each of those guys for 45 minutes or an hour, and our position coach sees them. And like John said, that there's a lot of people that get to see these guys, and we take all their input as we evaluate and build a profile on the player.
John, how has your approach changed this year, picking in the bottom third of the draft as opposed to the last few years when you've had a pick in the top part of the draft?
Make sure we got plenty of food in the cafeteria. We're going to be sitting there for a while. You guys too. Yeah, it's probably a little harder to maybe predict. It seems like you look at all of these mock drafts, which we do, right, wrong, or indifferent, and see where maybe some guys are projected. You try to gather intel on where a prospect or 2 or 3 might go. But at the end of the day, we've got to sit there for 24 picks if we stay at 25 and watch those guys come off the board.
As you guys have gone through this process together, do you find yourselves liking similar players? I mean, you guys have talked about what you're looking for. Have you found through this process that you're on the same page on what some of the guys you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that there's strengths and weaknesses. There may be something that Vrabel sees that I might not have picked up on the first time I looked at him, and vice versa. And we sat there and we watched the film together. I think that's important to have that dialogue back and forth. I think that's important to have that dialogue with the position coaches, the coordinators, the scouts. Again, this is a very inclusive process. At the end of the day, we have to do what's best for the football team, and that's what we'll do.
John, with the 30 visits, are these guys that's kind of the bulk of what you know about them, or are these guys that you really just want to take a deeper look at that you already have a bunch of information on? Jim?
Great question. Yeah, those visits can serve several purposes. It could be a medical visit for a player that wasn't at the combine. It could be a question that came up from an all-star game interview that we had with a player that we really wanted to clarify. It could be, we want to ask, a little bit of background information more on the player and get to know them a little bit better. There really isn't one reason why they're on the 30 or not. It really just kind of depends upon the player and the questions that we're trying to get answered.
Are they all guys that you would consider viable picks for you?
Some so, some not. Again, there's guys that you bring in, and you're just trying to do as much homework, and it's like test driving a car. Like, you're not going to buy a car usually sight unseen. You're going to go drive it. You're going to test it and make sure that's the right fit for you. That's what we try to do with these players: is bring them in, see if they're going to fit our culture, fit our football team. If so, then they remain on the board. If not, then we'll move on.
But are there some on the front end that it would be highly unlikely you draft based on need and availability? If you're talking to, I don't know, I think the reports that you've had Lamar Jackson in or Mason Rudolph, if they're going off the board in the first round, seems unlikely that you can take them.
Yeah, I mean, I think but that's the thing with the draft is you never know who might be staring you in the face when you pick. We try to make sure that we are as exhaustive with the process as possible on the players that we bring in here, in case the scenario happens. There's a million different scenarios that we talk through, and we try to maybe not literally a million, but there's a bunch.
You judge value on those players for a trade scenario, though? I mean, you brought up like Lamar Jackson. Say a team wants to come up and get him. If you have a better idea of what he is, does that help you?
Well, I think from a trade standpoint, I think that's really dependent upon the how much they value the player they're trying to come and get. That's their evaluation. I don't know what the other team's evaluation of the player is. That would really drive that move or not.
What do you feel like the meat of this draft is value-wise in terms of, where there's a number of players that are draftable, maybe not in the first round, but maybe it gets really interesting in the second, third, fourth round?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think it's very similar to drafts in the past. There's got to be 32 guys taken in the first round, whether they have the quote-unquote first-round grade or not. That's up to us 32 teams that are evaluating them. But I think there's good value in those middle rounds. I think there's players in that that second, third, fourth, even fifth rounds that are going to contribute to teams in this league.
If this draft was 2 weeks ago or a month ago, is there anything that you couldn't get done if the calendar was revised?
I think it probably would have hurt us a little bit on some of our visits. There were some guys that that we might not have gotten to because their calendars got full, and it might have knocked us out of a couple of those. These guys' schedules and dates get filled up pretty quickly with 32 teams trying to get them in and talk to them. So we have to try to be cognizant of that and make sure that the clubs have enough time to visit with the prospects.
Does the wait ever seem too long? And Mike, I imagine, would you like to have your roster more set 2 weeks earlier, a month earlier?
I think it's been great to have these players in here today, that we had 65 guys on our roster, 64 I think we're at. So I think what that's allowed us to do is focus on the guys that are in the building, and then after those guys leave, then John and I focus on the guys that that aren't on this team or that aren't in the building. But when 8 o'clock comes around and everybody's in here, that's where John and I's focus is on the guys that are currently on our team. And then when they leave, then we focus on the guys that aren't, just like we'll do today up until Thursday night. So it's just given us a great opportunity to be with those guys, get their system in here, because that's going to be the bulk of our team, right? The guys that are here now. And then we're going to continue to add players, and they're going to help us, and they're going to build a role, but they're not here yet.
With Monday on the field with guys this week, you've talked about not really feeling like you're a coach until you get into that stuff, and you told us you weren't going to try to force feed a lot early. What's kind of the goal for these 3 days in terms of how much you can do with them when you're finally out there with them?
I think we want to have a clean operation. I think we want to be able to go out there and look like a football team and have understanding of how we're going to conduct practice. This is going to be very similar to the OTAs that we run. I've told them that. I think it's going to be an opportunity for them to see their coaches on the field, what their drills are going to be, what their individual drills are going to be, what the development plan is for these players to make them better on the field. We've tried to make them better the best that we could in the meeting rooms and in the weight room, but it's going to be a good opportunity to see how practice is structured and what the warm-up's going to be like, what the individuals are going to be like, how we're going to do the team period. So that's what I'm looking forward to is guys bouncing around, running around, and also just having a clean operation.
It was just a small snapshot too, but what you see this week or maybe what you see in the first couple of weeks of the off-season program have any bearing on what happens in the draft this weekend?
Probably not, no. No, I would say no.
You okay with 6 picks in this draft? Would you like to accumulate more along the way? Or
I love my draft picks, Jim.
Yeah, when can you do that? I mean, there are certain spots in the draft where you'll have a feel, this is where I can maybe get some.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. There may be a scenario that comes up Thursday night, and we bail on 25. You know, Gordon, it's the value of the player that's staring at you on the board versus the value of the picks that you can get. Can you get that player that you're considering at 25 4 picks later, or are you going to miss out on him? And would you rather have another, I don't know, second, third round pick? That's stuff that we'll have to evaluate. I'm working through some of that now, just preliminarily, what that would take for us to kind of dance around the board there late.
Would you say you initiate more calls or you field more calls then?
Well, when we're on the clock, it'll be fielding calls. Up until then, it'll be more initiating the calls. If there's a player on the board that we really like, and we don't think he will make it to us, and we don't have to. Like Jim said, we only have 6 picks. We don't want to give up too much draft currency to move up if we don't have to. But that team may be staring at, maybe their player's gone that they were going to take, and they're willing to mortgage it for, next to nothing. So,
You guys set up your draft board and then maybe go with John and Ryan and maybe some of the scouts and go through your own mock draft and say, we think so-and-so is going to take this and try to see what might be on the board when your pick comes?
Yeah, you count players. You count players. This can just say this guy's gone. Try to get to 25. Try to get to number 25.
Like I'm assuming you've never been in the draft room, I guess, or the war room, I guess, during draft weekend.
You assume wrong again, Jim.
Okay, you have to.
0 for 2, Jim.
What's the process like? How much are you looking forward to being in it with John this weekend?
Yeah, I think like John mentioned, it's going to be a long time to pick. We were earlier last year in Houston, and they made a trade for Deshaun, and it's interesting and kind of watching that go down. That was kind of the first, I guess, trade that I was able to watch it happen, and pick up the phone and call and kind of watch that go down, and then the Texans went up and got a player. I think John and I will be, I would imagine, similar to the conversations that we have every morning and every night before we leave. Like, let's take a look at this guy. What do you think here? Are we comfortable with this guy? And continue to kind of move and stack that board around, I would imagine, as the first round goes down.
When you're calling John and initiating that discussion about a possible trade down with teams before the draft, obviously at 25, any team that moves up, they're going to want to wait to see who's there, who may be available. How much of that discussion is just allowing other teams to recognize that you are interested in trading down, and how much of that discussion is actually pinpointing assets that you may think are of value that that team has? I mean, how much does that discussion progress?
I think it really probably manifests itself closer to when we're on the clock. If there's a team at, say, 28, 29, 30, that they're counting their board, and there's, they've got 4 players that they really like, and they have to weigh the likelihood of those 4 players weathering the storm for 8 picks and making it to them, or do they need to make a move and try to go up and get the guy? If that's the case, then that's when you might could get some extra currency out of it. So again, I think as it inches closer to our pick, that's when those phone calls will start to really manifest themselves, and you'll start to gauge what are they really trying to get out of it. Are they trying to just gather intel, or are they really looking to move?
You're analyzing what some of these potential trade partners had when
Correct.
you pick up the phone.
No question, yeah.
If your 4 or 5 aren't looking good to last until 25, what's kind of the balance between deciding if you want to go up and get one or shifting into the next 4?
I'd say cost of doing business. Yeah, cost of doing business. What's that going to cost me to move up there versus what's the resources or draft currency I can attain from moving back?
John, there's a lot of information that comes out this week. Some of it true, some of it wildly untrue. How do you process through all that?
I'd say mostly wildly untrue. Yeah, I mean, you just try to sort through it, and you try to connect as many dots as possible, knowing that once the commissioner puts the teams on the clock and the draft gets going, all bets are kind of off. There was a lot of movement last year. Teams trading around, moving to get players. It'll probably be the same thing this year once the clock starts. So you just try to sift through all of it and gather as much intel as possible. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to do what's best for the team.
John, when you talk about all the homework you're doing on the guys that could go in the later rounds, how important is it to hit on those guys, and how crucial can it be to building a roster to elite level?
I think anytime if you can get return on those guys in those later rounds with play on the field, whether it be offensively, defensively, in the kicking game, I think that's good. I think we've done a pretty good job the last couple of years of finding some guys to carve out a niche, carve out a role on this football team, and contribute. So we're hoping we can kind of sift through those guys over the weekend and come away with a couple that can help us.
How much could you benefit if there is a run on quarterbacks in the first half of the first round? Because it looks like it would drop some players that might go in the teens down in your direction.
If 24 would go, it would be awesome. Probably not going to happen. But I would say the more of those guys that can go, certainly benefits us.
I don't imagine many guys sitting up at press conferences like this are saying that they're part of it, but when you say most of what comes out this week is mostly wildly untrue, surely if not you have colleagues around the league who are putting that out there, yes, with intent?
Yeah, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and smoke screens that get thrown around this week to try to help the team.
John, you go into a draft thinking at the end of these 3 days, I want to have at least one guy from 5 or 6 positions, whatever order I get them, or is that dangerous to sort of box yourself in that way?
Again, at the end of the day, we want to come away with good football players, guys that are going to buy into what we're about. Again, like I said earlier, I think the depth of our roster, I really like the depth of where our roster's at right now. And we can add players at a lot of different positions. So to pigeonhole yourself in that way and say, I've got to come away with X, Y, and Z, could be a little tough. Again, I just think we're just trying to improve the football team.
Mike, do you have a depth chart this week as you have guys out there? I would imagine you have to order them in some fashion.
Yeah, I think they've got, we'll have something here. We're going to meet this afternoon and make sure that, that we're able to have 2 groups, and run them out there and make sure that the health of the team and where they're at after the first 2 weeks, talk to the strength coach, find out where they're at, find out how much he thinks they can handle at practice. And then we'll find out where guys are going to fit, where Matt and Dean and, Craig are going to put them. So there's going to have to be a depth chart. There can't be, 30 guys out there on defense run out there for every snap and 30 on offense. So, we'll put that together this afternoon, talk to the players about it tomorrow morning when they come in. But I would imagine that everybody's going to get equal reps, and we're really just focused on seeing if we were able to learn something about the system offensively and defensively, and then what the operation looks like.
Like how do you want guys to react to players picked at their positions, and maybe when you're a player, how do you react when it?
Watched every draft, Jim, for 14 years because I knew that they were trying to take somebody that was supposed to take my job, and that's not a bad thing. I think as soon as you understand that and embrace that competition and that role, you can help a guy and you can mentor a guy and still beat him out and still have a relationship with the head coach that's drafting players, or the GM that's drafting players at your position. That's really what this game is about. And so I hope our team and our players react like a pro would, that I'm going to go out and do my job and then provide value and prove my worth every day to this team.
How difficult is it to learn that lesson?
I don't know. I did it for 14 years, so hopefully our players, I just couldn't do it anymore. They finally drafted better players. I wasn't very good at that point in time. It's fundamental to understand that, I think, as a player, that there's decisions that have to be made in the best interest of the team. It's what John and I are going to do. And I want our players to be as competitive as they can for as long as they can to withstand that type of player acquisition and help those players, but also compete with them and understand that that's how teams get better.
That couple more.
Mike, you've had a chance to go out there and meet a lot of these guys that you're looking at this weekend. Is there a particular personality trait that you're hunting for when you meet these guys?
I think we had talked about this, that they have to love ball. I think that the easy question you ask is, do they love ball? And then you start to evaluate them a little deeper. Because if they don't really love ball, it's going to be tough for them to do it day in and day out consistently when things are tough. And I told our team that everybody throws culture around. Like, everybody wants to have a great culture. Well, to me, culture is what your team looks like at its worst, not at its best. Like, when you're 7-1, everybody's going to have a great culture. But it's when you hit those tough times along the season and middle of training camp, when there's no light at the end of the tunnel, then you find out what kind of culture that you have on your football team. So they have to love ball. I think that they obviously are going to be competitive, physical, mentally tough. They're going to get conditioned by being here, and then hopefully they're disciplined players. And talent is obviously at the top of that order, but all those other character, I guess, profile would be where John and I are looking to find those players.
How often do you come across a guy that you can tell doesn't love ball?
How often? There's times. I think that it's along the course of an interview or a meeting, visiting with a guy, you see it. Not a lot, but it's an easy evaluation as far as I'm concerned.
John, when did the calls start to be made about potential undrafted free agents? And can you kind of describe what that seems like, the scouts and your guys trying to scramble to get some of those guys?
Yeah, when the last pick's in, that's when we'll start that process, getting those guys lined up and trying to get them committed to come in here. It's a bit of a free-for-all, kind of the wild, wild west. There's a lot of, this phone's ringing, that phone's ringing, there's text messages going. But we've got a plan in place. We've got it, organized as we think will be beneficial to our football team to try to add those guys post-draft.
You sort of divide up the list where, like, every scout has 10 guys or so that you expect are likely to be undrafted, and say these are whichever ones are still here, you call these guys, and go? Is that?
Yeah, we've got kind of a priority ranking of those guys, and got it divvied up between scouts and coaches as well. Coaches will get involved in the process as well to try to get those guys secured.
How important is it to be the first one who calls?
I wonder if the line's open or not. Sometimes the line's busy. Thank you.